Hello, everyone. Our channel selects viewpoints and analytical articles from think tanks and well-known figures within the Chinese internet and presents them to Western readers so that everyone can understand how China thinks. If you find this helpful, please subscribe, hit the like button, and share our channel. Thank you. It should be emphasized that the content we present reflects only the original author's views. Our aim is merely to enhance readers' understanding of perspectives from the Chinese intellectual and policy-making circles. In recent years, the global conversation around so-called rare earths or critical metals has often assumed that these materials are simply mined directly from ore bodies, as if the extraction were a straightforward matter of digging out hidden veins. But that is a significant misunderstanding. In fact, for metals like gallium, the reality is quite different. The visible metal is often a byproduct of an enormous industrial system, one driven by huge scale and long-standing industrial capacity, not just the ore-plus technology combination many imagine. The prerequisite for gallium production is not simply a rich ore body, but the sustained output of tens of millions of tons of alumina through the Bayer process. And with that capacity, you begin to see meaningful gallium recovery, because Western economies, notably the United States, Europe, and Japan, have in recent decades reduced their heavy industrial base and shrunk the scale of their primary processing capacity, the recreation of a full upstream industrial chain for byproduct. Metals is extremely difficult. It is not merely about deploying a new technology or building a pilot plant. It is about rebuilding the entire ecosystem of large-scale plants, continuous operations, material streams, and skilled labor. That essential role of scale is often overlooked. Many focus on innovation or cutting-edge processes, but without the underlying scale, even the best technology struggles to deliver strategic output. China's strength today lies in having already built that scale and chained it into a strategic base over decades. And that is the core insight we want to bring out today. With that context in mind, let's now turn to the article and hear how the author frames China's strategic industrial advantage, published in the Chinese internet on November 4, 2025. When the world turns its attention back to so-called rare earths, the air fills with a familiar anxiety. Western politicians and media warn of fragile supply chains, as if these critical elements are locked away in a secret cave, and all it takes is the right key. But if we look at a simple case, just 100 tons of metallic gallium, we can strip away the illusion and face a harsher, more commercial truth. The reason the United States and Europe struggle to produce these materials is not resource scarcity. It is the loss of the industrial muscle memory and the structural backbone needed to support this kind of output. So let's start with the math behind 100 tons of gallium. To obtain that amount of high-purity metal, you don't begin with a fancy lab. You begin with a daunting industrial prerequisite, roughly 20 million tons of alumina capacity per year. Gallium, often called the backbone of the electronics industry for its role in semiconductors and communications, rarely occurs in independent ore bodies. Its only scalable source is as a byproduct of alumina production, the feedstock for primary aluminum. In the massive Bayer process, gallium exists as an impurity in the circulating mother liquor. Extracting it requires a chain of operations: ion, exchange, solvent extraction, and electrolysis that can only pay off when you are already running at colossal scale. Here is why the scale matters. Industry data shows that for every ton of alumina produced, the mother liquor can concentrate only about 10 grams of gallium. So to accumulate 100 tons of gallium, you need to process a volume of mother liquor corresponding to about 20 million tons of alumina output. This is no ordinary factory task. This is the footprint of a nation-level industrial base. With that in mind, who actually holds a ticket to this champions club of scale? In practice, only one company clears the 20 million ton threshold: Aluminum Corporation of China, or Chinalco, with consolidated alumina capacity of about 22 million tons per year as of 2024. Right behind it are two more Chinese players, Weiqiao at roughly 17 million tons and Xinfa at about 11 million tons. It is a telling picture. The so-called Champions Club is tiny, and its members are almost exclusively Chinese. While Western policymakers talk about alternative sources, China has spent decades building heavy industry capacity and has turned scale itself into a formidable barrier. This wall is not a matter of secret technology. It is the compounding advantage of size. What about Alcoa in the United States, the storied aluminum giant? Globally, largely in places like Australia and Brazil, Alcoa controls around 17 million tons of alumina capacity, which on paper could yield more than 80 tons of gallium as a byproduct. Yet the United States has not produced primary gallium at scale since 1987, and domestic demand is almost entirely met by imports. This exposes a classic paradox of the Western industrial model. Having capacity is not the same as having the craft to turn it into strategic output. There is a gap in process capability. The mainstream route for recovering gallium, ion exchange, demands continuous R&D and meticulous chemical operations. Over the past few decades, Western firms focused on alumina and primary aluminum, and they largely avoided investing in what they saw as a low-margin byproduct. Older methods such as lime milk extraction remain costly and polluting, and they cannot compete. There is also a broken chain issue. Even if Alcoa forced out some crude gallium, what comes next? Without domestic high-purity refining and without a full downstream in compound semiconductors like gallium arsenide, a single isolated step becomes a commercial dead end. Faced with rebuilding a long, low-margin chain from scratch, it has been easier to import finished material from China. And then there is the economic calculus. For firms that optimize for shareholder returns, gallium recovery looks like a poor bet. It is capital-heavy, slow to pay back, and out of sync with a decades-long preference for asset-light strategies, financialization, and fast cycles. For Europe, Japan, and other advanced economies, the picture is even tougher. Their alumina capacities are typically in the low million-ton range, far short of the 20 million-ton entry ticket. Even with cutting-edge extraction technology, the input volume limits their output to kilogram levels. In global terms, that is a drop in the bucket. It is like a local bakery with world-class technique trying to build an aircraft carrier. Skill is admirable, but the scale is missing. So what then is truly rare here? Seen through the prism of those 100 tons of gallium, the real scarcity is not the element itself, but the completeness of an industrial system. The West's difficulty is like a software and finance economy suddenly trying to assemble an aircraft carrier. It is not that they lack blueprints or steel, it is that they lack the ecosystem, special steels, precision machine tools, heavy lifts, and tens of thousands of skilled workers. Every link matters. For decades, Western economies treated heavy industry as yesterday's business, outsourcing it while pursuing leverage and brand premiums. China, meanwhile, kept investing in what looked clumsy and dirty, but was essential. It turned those foundations into a national strategic base. When supply chain shocks arrive, it becomes obvious that you can print money, but you cannot print an alumina refinery. You can write code, but you cannot code an end-to-end gallium recovery chain into existence. That is the real rare earth today, a strategic asset forged by scale, systems thinking, patience, and sustained national will, something that cannot be copied overnight. And rebuilding it will demand not a quick pivot, but another 30 years of grit. That concludes today's narration. Through the voices of China's industrial thinkers, we've explored how policy, technology, and strategy converge in the country's push to rise through software and intelligence. For clarity and flow, some parts of the original conversation have been summarized or slightly adjusted. Certain technical or context-heavy sections have also been refined to make them easier for international audiences to follow. If you would Like to read the full transcript or discuss the ideas in more depth? You are welcome to reach out to us directly. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe to How China Thinks. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.